All right. So, I'm hoping by now, um, you guys have started the online course. Kind of what we'll do over the 4 weeks is go kind of in the same order that that online course goes, which is also the order that the rule book goes. Um, there's 7 rules in our rule book. And it starts basically from real basic lacrosse stuff all the way up to how we deal with simultaneous penalties and adjudication. As far as sports rule books I've looked at, it's one of the easier ones to follow because there's only 7 rules. It makes sense. It makes the organization very easy, and it makes it easier to kind of keep up with the rule book. Um, so tonight, what we are going to do is go through rules 1 through 3, which are pretty basic stuff. I think everybody here has a pretty strong lacrosse background. So, um, yeah, we're going to kind of go through it quickly. It's also the kind of stuff as you start officiating, you'll learn. At any point during the meeting, if you have a question, there's only a few of us in here, so don't hesitate to chime in and ask a question. If I want to wait to answer it, I'll just let you know. If uh, if I can answer it, I will. You can also put questions in the chat, and we can get to those at the end. The important thing is that you have a good basic understanding of what we're doing here. And again, when we do these classes, like anything else, I could sit here, for an hour and a half for the next 4 weeks and spit stuff at you, and most of it will just kind of bounce off. So the big thing here is to get the background. That's what we're working on, and then get you on the field. And my experience has always been that the real learning of the sport and officiating our sport comes from actually being on the field. And anybody here who's officials of other sports can kind of attest to that. I know Bert can. He made Burton Tyson is a applicant from last year, did a great job, and he's asked to come back just to continue to get more knowledge. But he can attest, you learn a little bit more about the game and a little bit more about officiating every time you get out on the field. So we never stop learning. So I'm just hoping to give you some of the basics to get you started. All right. Just real quick, since this is our first class, I think all of you were in one of the meet and greets, maybe except Evan. Uh, and again, congratulations on being at this point. You are now officially on the road to becoming a men's lacrosse official. As I said earlier, it's something, I really like. I've become kind of this lacrosse referee nerd. Um, and I really enjoy it. I've met all of you. Just real quick, if we could just start out, and if everybody in the room could just kind of introduce themselves, what part of the state are you in, and just give us, a 10-word lacrosse background. We'll start with Evan.
All right, so I'm Evan. I live in Millsboro, Delaware, so lower slower. I grew up playing lacrosse my whole life. My dad did as well, so he made sure that I'm well rounded in the sport, and I love the game, and I'm looking to do my due diligence.
Very good. Evan's father is one of our officials. He transferred in from the Southern Lacrosse Officials Association several years ago, and has really done a great job for us. So, go ahead, Bert. Introduce yourself real quick since you're going to
All
be
right, good
here.
afternoon. All right, Bert Tyson. This will be my second year officiating lacrosse. Coming over from football, and I had no lacrosse background last year. I never played the game. Didn't offer it in school when I was in high school. And like Greg mentioned, the class is great. However, you will learn a lot on the field, and you will learn a lot on the games, especially with the veteran officials.
Very good.
Mhm.
Wayne.
Yes, sir. Um, I'm coming on. I'm my first year official. I'm the part of Delaware I do live in is Wilmington, inner city. Prior, being like my lacrosse experience, I played fairly a little bit in high school. I went to Concord, graduated, during COVID 2020 year. And then I picked it up like leaving middle school. I went to Skyline. Probably like leaving eighth grade summer, leading into my freshman year of high school. So I really wish I stick with playing lacrosse. The main sport I really did, I mainly played was football. But if I had to go back and choose again, I really feel like I would flip flop. Lacrosse, I really enjoyed playing lacrosse when I was coming up through my earlier years. So,
Very
but
good.
yeah, looking to do work here, and, join you guys.
Welcome, Wayne. David.
Dave Leon. I'm originally from Long Island. I played lacrosse through junior high and high school, and coached my son his whole life. I went on to play Division II college lacrosse. I also coach. I coached Beacon Middle School last season, and I just love the sport. So, and I'm from the Lewis area.
Very good. Glad to have another Long Island guy down there in the Lewis area. Pat.
I'm Pat. I live in Wilmington, so North Delaware. I'm from Delco. I played high school and college lacrosse, and I coached 1 year at a Howard JV level.
And Coach Conway said to say hello. He
Okay, that's good.
did remember you. So good guy.
Yep.
He gave you a great reference. So now you got to live up to it.
Wow.
All right. And then
We'll see.
Dan.
I'm Daniel Evans. I played in high school and in college. I coached a little for my nephew's teams that he was on. I'm from Dover.
All right. So we got a good mix, north, south of the canal. Certainly those of you who've played and been around it for a long time, a lot of this will be review. Newer people, it takes a little while to get, and even more so important when you get on the field. We'll get everybody there. Our group is comprised of a whole lot of different people, both some people who have played in Division I lacrosse at very high levels, down to people who picked it up when they became a dad, some of our football officials who never played the game and never really even saw a game until they were standing there in stripes. But anybody can pick it up and do a great job, and the group is here to support and help you get through. So let's move on. So we're going to go through rules 1, 2, and 3. They are all kind of lumped together. It's kind of just the basics of stuff you need to know to get started and get the game prepared. What we'll do today, basically, just talk about a lot of the basics. We're going to learn about the different participants in the game. So we certainly think of the players, but there's other people, including ourselves as officials, who all have a role in getting a lacrosse game started, and then safely finished. And then we will start to talk a little bit about our responsibilities as the official for facilitating or managing the game. So again, if you have questions, don't hesitate to break in. Sometimes the best way we learn is through those discussions. So in the beginning, the teams. So each team is comprised of 10 players. All right. And they're broken up into positions, and they're represented by these little blocks. So you have three attackmen. They're your primary offensive players. You have three midfielders, who, they basically what they are, they run offense and defense. And you have three defensive players and a goalie. Okay. You don't, sometimes you have different combinations of these players. You have some specialists. We'll talk about that a little bit later. The one thing you cannot have a lacrosse game without on the field at all times is a legally equipped goalkeeper. Okay, so that's very important. It's not like hockey where you can pull the goaltender. And there are actually rules in high school lacrosse where field players cannot assume the role of a goalie if the goalie's out. So we will learn all that and talk about all that. We have the lacrosse goal, we call the cage. And it's pretty simple. It's a 6x6 square. So 6 foot high, 6 foot wide. They're supposed to always be painted orange. Sometimes you'll find them different. There's not really a huge rule or push, but we do like them to be orange. It just makes them easier to see and find and discern with the ball. And then the goal is always backed with this net. And the net, there's certain things in the book, in the rules that tell you exactly, that how wide those nets have to be, or how wide the mesh is in the nets. So that is what the lacrosse goal looks like. And then we have lacrosse balls. Okay, and they can be any color. For men, it's standard white, but you can buy balls in almost any color. And you can play with any color as long as all the balls in the game are the same. And if it's going to be non-white, both coaches need to agree to play with the other colored balls. Again, generally we play with white balls. Occasionally, for whatever reason, they play with different colored balls. We do some games inside Chase Fieldhouse, if you've ever been in there. Very brilliant of them to put white walls and a white ceiling, which makes it very difficult to see the balls. So we're using something a little bit brighter. One thing about the lacrosse balls is they always have to have this word, NOCSAE, NOCSAE. They are the standard bearers and come up with what makes any piece of equipment in sports safe. So if the ball does not say NOCSAE on it, that ball cannot be used. All right. So just to go back one, well, I'll stay here. The objective of the game is to get the ball in the goal. All right. And we'll talk later of what that looks like when we get to play the game. But you score goals by putting the ball into that goal. This is what our standard field looks like. All right. So generally they are 110 yards long. Okay, and 53 1/3 to 60 yards wide. We don't go out and measure each field. In most cases on turf, it's pretty easy to figure out, if they're right. And then there are some other lines that we use on the field. The biggest ones are, of course, the midfield line. All right. And then these two lines on this side, we call them the restraining lines. There are certain uses for these lines as far as what we do on face-offs and what happens when teams clear the ball from one end to the other. And then also on the field, you have these wing lines. Okay, and that is how the wing players on a face-off, that is where they stand. That's what those are used for. And then you have two end lines. Okay. When we set up the lacrosse field, okay, generally we want pylons on every corner, and we want a pylon on the center, okay, to help us find the midfield. And then when you come over here, you have the coaches in the table area. And this has changed a little bit recently. And this isn't the best drawing, but this kind of table area is where the main area is where substitutions take place, and it's also where people serve penalties. This is 10 yards wide, 5 yards on each side of the midfield. And then you have this kind of coaches area. And if you notice, it's got lines along it. Okay, so the coaches stand and are supposed to coach from in these boxes, and the teams are supposed to stay behind these lines. We're working hard on getting that situated. It's not always as easy as you would think. One thing that was added last year is there is another 10-yard buffer on either side of the table area where players stay back from that. So you have a good wide area. All right. Again, we don't really measure these lines. Like you can see all the lines are supposed to be 4 inches wide. We assume they're right. At the beginning of the game, we will look at the field. A couple things we're going to really look at. You do have to have a continuous line through the midfield, even if there's a logo there. And on some of these newer turf fields where they didn't have it put in, we have to require them to put some kind of paint or something down to have that line. If there is no line when we go to do the first face-off and the coaches refuse to get that line there, it's a technical foul, and the visiting team would get the first possession. There'd be no face-off. And we'll talk more about how we adjudicate all that. This year also, or last year, they added that these end lines, actually all lines have to be continuous. But one of the problems we're having is they build the nice, beautiful turf fields, and they put nice the letters in the turf field. And those of you who play lacrosse know how important this end line is. So in a lot of places, like if you have a word like riders across the back of your end zone, and it goes right through the middle of like the R's and the E's, those can be up to 7 or 8 yards where there's no line. So now they require a line to be there. That line can either be stitched into the turf, it can be painted, or it can be created with some kind of a shadow line through the logo. But we just want to make sure we have them there. And then we also need the crease is very important. So when we first get to a field, we double check, make sure the crease is there, a goal line, and the end lines and mid lines are complete. Kind of the adage is that, if there is a problem with the field, if somebody complains, well, it's, too short on this end, or we don't think this is long enough. There's really, it's not like you're going to tell all the kids to go home and not play. We make a note of that, and we hope to get those kind of things corrected. But in the very end, each team gets to play defense in one end of the field twice. So, everybody's dealing with the same conditions. A couple years ago, to kind of help alleviate the number of lines and things that were on fields, they came up with this unified field. A couple of places have it. Basically, the field is it's a little bit longer. And the way they do these restraining lines to match the boys and the girls lines, it creates more space behind the cage. But it's really not a big deal. The field is still the same for everybody. Okay. Any questions on the field? Excellent. Okay, the stick, that's the main thing. It is called the cross. So that's kind of where you get the word lacrosse, the cross. There's several different kinds of sticks, depending on your position. For field players, all right, this is what the stick generally looks like. Yeah, there are certain dimensions to it. All right, so it has to be 6 inches across here. It has to be 10 inches from here to here. Okay, not including the ball stop. All right, and this 4-inch line is demarcating where these shooting strings are. And these shooting strings can't be more than 4 inches below the top of the stick. Okay. So that's the basic for any offense or defenseman stick. This would be what we call a shorty, a short pole, or it's the standard offensive stick. And these sticks are between 40 and 42 inches long. Okay. All this is in the rule book. What I've done is I actually put a piece of tape with these dimensions on my tape measure, because I have a bad memory. And then a long pole, generally they're 6 feet. They can't be any bigger than 6 feet. So we hope somebody on the crew is 6 feet tall, and as long as it's not taller than them, it's a legal stick. It starts at 52. At any one time, a team can only have 4 of these long poles on the field. You can have as many short sticks as long as this adds up to 9, because the goalie stick is a little different. So that's that. You can have these little ball stops, but you can only have a single ball stop on there. You can't stack up the ball stops to help restrict the ball to stay in there. And also the way the throat is on this stick matches our scorecard. So that's our template to find out if it's legal, because there's about 6 different dimensions required in this. So we made this little template. And then they have to have an end cap that is manufactured for a lacrosse stick. And there's several types. A lot of them look like this. There's a couple that's a plug in the end, and there's a little collar that holds them, holds it tight. It's just got to be there. The days of having nothing on the end of the stick, because they're hollow and a lot of them are metal or an alloy of some sort, they could be dangerous. So that has to be there. You guys used to put like just a beer cap on there to be cool or whatever. You can't do that anymore. All right. All right. Player equipment, what's required. So this is what a field player is required to wear. Okay. And this year, there's some real emphasis on some of this equipment. Let me go over it first. Okay. A helmet manufactured for lacrosse. Okay. A mouthpiece is required. Arm pads. Okay, there's all different kinds of arm pads or elbow pads. At the minimum, they have to cover the elbows. They have to be manufactured for lacrosse. This top piece with the red is the chest protector. A couple years ago, or not chest protector, shoulder pads. But a couple years ago, they required all shoulder pads now have this bigger area in the front. Okay, and it's called Noxie ND200. And what they're supposed to be designed to do is prevent that cardio. I can't think of what it's called, but it's kind of what happened to the player from Buffalo when he got hit with a helmet right in the head or right here on the chest. There's a condition where if you get hit in a certain spot on your chest at a certain velocity, at a certain point in your heartbeat, your heart will stop. And that's what happened to the player from Buffalo. It happened to a player at Loyola High School a couple years ago, a freshman kid there, and his heart stopped. And fortunately, the trainer was very well versed on what to do, and there were doctors there, and the young man was saved, and he is now a defenseman at the University of Maryland. But because of all that, they've added this piece in. These are rib pads. They are not required, but they're highly recommended. And then you have to have gloves manufactured for lacrosse. And the one thing when we do equipment inspections, we make sure they haven't torn out all these fingers and palms. If there's some wear, they can tape over them, but that can't be open. Okay. Cleats made for lacrosse. They have to have molded plastic. There can be no metal on the bottom. That's pretty much the big thing. If you're looking at these or there's a complaint, that's what you're going to see. They can be high tops. They can be low tops. You see a lot of guys with soccer shoes. That's fine. You just can't have any metal cleats. And then a couple of years ago, they added you're required to wear a protective cup. At the beginning of the game, and we'll talk about it in a minute, we walk up to the head coaches, and the head referee and the crew will ask very simply, Coach, do you certify all your players are properly equipped to rule? And the coach is required to acknowledge that, yes, that is the truth. They're certified. They have the correct equipment. Okay, that's a way certifying them protects you. That you've done that. At that point, it's kind of on the coach. Couple things this year, especially those of you who've played or watched lacrosse recently have noticed this huge last few years huge kind of thing of helmets falling off. Just randomly, not even on a hit. Helmets are coming off, and the kids are just slapping them back on their head. They're not properly fastening the chin straps or anything like that. They've added rules in, to require the players to properly put that 4-point chin strap in and get the chin cup underneath the chin. And then the helmet won't come off starting this year. If the helmet does come off, we're stopping play. And that player has to leave the field and cannot return until the next dead ball. And we'll go over that more and more. But that's there's no wiggle room in that. Even if there's an illegal hit and the helmet comes off, that the player with the helmet coming off still has to leave the field. In the NCAA, it is actually a penalty now, or a foul, could be a technical foul, if your helmet comes off and they have to stop play. So That's a big emphasis right now because it was terrible. The other thing we're going to emphasize this year in the rules are the elbow pads. So I don't know if any of you played defense, but for a lot of defensemen, they wear these elbow pads that are about this thick or wide, and they seem to like to cover their tricep. So we are now going to focus on having those worn, and the way the rule is written, worn as the manufacturer intended. So we cover that again in the coach's certification. And then if players, are routinely wearing that equipment improperly, it's going to be a 1 minute penalty for them. All right, the goaltender. Okay, wears most of the same equipment with a few exceptions. Okay. They have to have this throat card, which is attached to the bottom of the helmet. It has to be manufactured for that. And basically that protects the throat from getting hit in the throat. They do not have to wear the shoulder pads or the arm pads. They are required to wear a chest protector. And that chest protector carries, of course, the same type of rating that the new shoulder pads do to prevent that cardiocarditis. They wear the gloves they wear look exactly the same as any field player, except most smart goalies. Evan will probably tell you there are special goalie gloves that have a little bit more padding, particularly around the thumb, in other areas to protect them and keep them safe. And then the same thing, cup and cleats. We do equipment checks. We're not looking to see if they're wearing a cup. We're really just looking to make sure they have the proper equipment. The coach's certification covers the cup. I've always kind of wanted to be the smart ass, and when a kid gets hit in the nuts and he's down there screaming and yelling, throw a flag from not wearing the right equipment. I have not done it yet, and please don't do that. But that's the only way you're going to know they're not wearing it. But I think the nut shot usually takes care of fixing that. All right. We already talked about this, the addition of the cup and the rules for the Comio Cordis. Again, all that's covered by the coach's certification. All right, uniforms. And this, everything so all that other equipment's required for any youth lacrosse game. So in the summer, things are a little bit different with the uniforms and the jerseys. They tend to wear pennies and lighter uniforms. But during our high school and middle school season, they wear jerseys, and they are required to cover the shoulder pads. So they can't wear something that doesn't cover the shoulder pads. Players also wear shorts. They're all supposed to match. And then if a player wears sweatpants, they all have to wear the same solid color sweatpants. So if somebody's wearing gray sweatpants, everybody has to have gray sweatpants. You can have a variety of different. Generally, the goalies will wear sweatpants, and they're kind of baggy. Kind of help with getting hit at 80, 90, 100 miles an hour in the leg with a lacrosse ball. It will help them with that. And then they cannot have any kind of tinted visor. They can have a clear visor. Okay, but if they have a clear visor, they cannot have any kind of colored lenses underneath. And that visor has to be designed for that helmet. Any questions on the uniforms? All right. Just to continue, the home team wears white. The visitors wear another color. This is newly added a couple years ago. It's usually not a problem. I do think the book does have some allowance for special occasions. Basically, we just want to make sure when the teams show up that we can tell who's on which team. So the jerseys should all be the same color, and they all should be in varsity wearing the same color helmets. And then the numbers, they can use any number from 0 to 99. They can't use multiple numbers, so everybody has to have a different number. They cannot use the number 00. I don't know why, but they can't. And then generally, too, when you talk about those uniform type of things, the only real penalty for improper uniforms is it's a technical foul, a turnover at the beginning of the game. I teach you all not to get involved in any of that. If it does become a problem, a coach complains about it, we give the coaches before the game starts every opportunity to fix it. Once the game starts, there's no uniform violations, no penalties, anything like that. If you sense there's going to be an issue with a coach bitching about a uniform before a game, just look at the other team. You'll find another violation. You'll find a kid, with a different color shooter shirt. You'll find a kid with the wrong color helmet, and then you'll have basically a violation on each team, and we're done. And your referee and I will guide you through this. Some prohibited equipment. Okay, everything, like I said, has to be manufactured for the game of lacrosse. So you can't wear a football helmet, you can't wear football shoulder pads, you can't wear these kind of football leg pads. All that is not designed for our sport. And players on the field cannot have any kind of artificial communication device to speak with people, off the field. The coaches are allowed to use stuff on the sidelines. They can bring iPad. A lot of them now are using iPads and some different systems to help them. And if every once in a while you see headsets, it's not like football. They just can't talk to players. They cannot wear any kind of jewelry unless it's religious or medical in nature. And if they do wear it, it has to be taped down. Again, we're not really looking for this, but if you do see a kid, like he's got his helmet off and he's got earrings on, it's best to at least remind him he can't do that. So, any questions about that? Uniforms, all that? All right, game personnel. So you have officials, timekeepers, scorekeepers, players, captains, an in-home, coaches, and a sideline manager. Let's focus first on us, the referees. So the rule book calls for a minimum of 2. When you have 2, you have a referee and an umpire. And that designation is really generally only known to us on the crew. It's not like football where, one guy's designated back judge, line judge, umpire. When we're on the field, whether we have 2 officials or 3 officials, we all have the same jobs and we're rotating around the field. And when we're in certain positions at certain times, we all do the same things. The referee is the crew chief at all times. And if there is an issue or a problem and the crew cannot come to a consensus about what we're talking about, then the referee is the person who has the final say. The referee also does all the certifications and discussions at the beginning that I'm going to talk about in a few minutes. And the referee also has the final say. Oh, I already said that. As far as our responsibility as officials, okay, so our authority begins when we arrive and it ends when we leave the immediate playing area. And we'll talk more about that as we go. Generally, we want to be, for a high school game, on the field at least 20 minutes before the game starts. And we end immediately after the game. Okay, we don't stick around for the handshake. We don't stick around for anything else. Our goal is to try to get out of there. And at that point, once we've left the playing area, whatever happens. We do not have any more authority. We do still have some responsibilities for game reporting if there are incidents and things like that. Okay, so that's us. Timekeeper, and there's really kind of a lot of times 2 timekeepers. Depending on the situation and where you're at. So the timekeeper keeps the game time and the timekeeper keeps the penalty times. In most cases, somebody's up in like a press box or a booth in the bleachers, assuming you're on a stadium field. They're keeping the game time and the score on the scoreboard. And then there is somebody at the table down on the field that is keeping track of the penalty time. We always want them to have a horn there. We like them to have the horn at the table, but we certainly have to have a horn on the scoreboard, and we always want to check that in the beginning. The penalty timers at the table are generally team managers, injured players, things like that, and the referee. We'll talk to them before the game and make sure they understand what they're doing, because they are responsible for keeping track of penalties, penalty times, and releasing players when their penalties are over. All right. Any questions about the timekeeper? The rule book goes over it very, in great detail. The scorekeeper, and again, sometimes this is split. If they're keeping score up on the scoreboard, they keep it up there. They're also supposed to keep a scorebook. Some teams are moving away from that because the huddle film system will keep a lot of the stats that the rule book keeps for them. But we do want them at the minimum to have some sort of way to record all of the penalties, how much time the penalty was, what the nature of the penalty was, who the penalties were on, those sort of things, because there are some rules about fouling out of a game if you have 5 minutes of personal time, personal penalty time. So any penalties that end in 00, if you accumulate 5 minutes of that, you're disqualified from the game. That's not an ejection. Also, if you get 2 unsportsmanlike penalties, you are ejected from the game. So you kind of need the scorekeeper to keep track of that. And it's always good that they're keeping track of things like timeouts and those sort of things. So, any questions? Very good. Okay, here's the second part from the first applicant class that we missed because I had to leave early for an emergency. All right, so in lacrosse, the players, and I think we'd referred to this earlier in this meeting, we have defensemen. Generally, a defenseman carries a 6-foot pole, but they also have short stick defensemen or short stick midfielders. Okay, your midfielders down here, they're your two-way players. A goalie, you have to have one goalie on the field properly equipped, or you can't have a game. And then attackmen, who are your primary offensive players, who generally stay in your offensive half of the field and generate offense. Where the defensemen generally stay in the defensive half of the field to play defense. There is no rule about who can cross, and we'll talk later, particularly in the play of the game, about what offsides looks like and how we figure that out. But it's not based on the type of player they are. It's based on a number. Okay. So that's what you have. You also have specialists. You'll have a face-off player, commonly referred to as a FOGO, and then a long stick midfielder who will be the fourth player with a long pole on the field, and they run on and off depending on whether the team is in offense or defense. Coaches. Okay, this is very important. You have head coaches. All right. They are responsible for everyone on their squad. So the players, other assistant coaches, managers, anybody who is on their sideline representing their school, they're responsible for. They are expected to act in a courteous manner at all time, and by rule, they're expected to assist with the management of the game. So when there's an issue or problem with their squad, or if they're the home coach, and you ask them, by rule, they're required to help and not hinder. Also, at the beginning of the game, the head coach is the one who certifies that the players are properly equipped. That's an important part of what we do every game. That helps with our liability. It also serves as a team warning. Okay, and then other coaches. Okay, so you have assistant coaches. Generally, the head coach is the person you would talk to. Other coaches, if they have a question, and if it's respectful, ask it. Those of you who have played or coached, you have generally a box coach who's responsible for substitution. Managing that box, that's a good person to talk to and kind of know what's going on. It's also a good person to warn when you're having bench issues and things like that. Often they're much more on top of that. You often get coaches questions from a person who calls himself the face-off coach, And again, if they ask at the right time and in the right way, then yes, 100%, you want to answer their questions. If they're disrespectful, if they're argumentative, generally we'll give them one warning, and then we would start to give them conduct and unsportsmanlike conduct fouls to correct their behavior. Another important player is called the in-home. And we ask for this at the beginning of the game from the head coach. The in-home is always a starting attackman, generally the first attackman listed in the book. And they have to come out at the beginning of the game in the pregame lineup. The main purpose of that in-home is they serve a penalty if under several circumstances. If the penalty is on a coach or the bench, somebody who's not on the field, that in-home serves that penalty. The in-home also serves a penalty if the person receiving the penalty has been ejected from the contest. So then that in-home serves a penalty. Or if for some other reason a player's unable to because of an injury or something like that. You always have to have someone serving the penalty in the penalty box. That's what the in-home does. And the rationale behind it is, it is a person you would consider a starter, a better player. But they just give us a number, and that's the person we use. Okay, captains. The captains are designated by the head coach at the beginning of the game. Their primary function in the beginning is at the coin toss. So before the game, we'll toss a coin, and that determines who defends what goal or who gets the first alternate possession. Okay. Also, it's good, you assume the captains are leaders of their teams, or people that you should be able to talk to when you're having problems with players. Maybe provide warnings, get behavior corrected before you have to get too involved, and it becomes an unsportsmanlike type of situation. I always tell the captains at the beginning of games I'm going to rely on them for that because they know their players. They know the players who are going to act poorly in bad situations or perceived bad situations, so we need their help. If they don't want to provide that help, or they become a problem, then they're treated like any other player. You can have at least one captain per team. One of them at the beginning is always designated as the speaking captain. This is during the coin toss. They stand closest to the referee. And when we do that coin toss, it's always the visitor who gets to call the coin toss. Okay. Ball retrievers, very simply, sometimes teams will provide a ball retriever to get balls after shots are out of bounds. Sometimes they're younger players they bring in. Sometimes they'll be JV players or something like that. And they will they have to wear a helmet and they have to wear a contrasting uniform. So you don't want somebody behind the goal retrieving balls in the same color as one of the people, and for safety they have to have a helmet. Okay, the game length for a high school varsity game, okay, they are 12-minute stop-start quarters. All right. JV games vary. In Delaware, we do JV games at 8 minutes stop-start or 10-minute running time. Youth games, summer tournaments, it all varies. You have to know that at the beginning. There's a 2-minute break between quarters and a 10-minute halftime. Okay. And later we'll talk about stalling rules and how we treat the last 2 minutes. The last 2 minutes of games that are close are treated differently than the rest of the game. Okay. When we start and stop the clock, a couple things. Okay. When we blow our whistle and there's a dead ball, we get our hand up in the air. Okay. That's the first thing. That tells everybody play has stopped, that we've blown our whistle, play has stopped. And then we tell people the direction the ball is going to go to when we restart. Okay. And then we put our hand up again so that everybody knows we have a dead ball situation until we restart. Okay. This happens during out of bounds. When it goes out of bounds, we're going to give one long blast on the whistle, put our hand in the air, point in the direction of play, and then put our hand back in the air until our partners are ready to go. If it's inbounds or unusual play, we may give several short blasts. Some people call this a cricket or a cicada whistle. Tweet, 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 tweet. Generally, that gets players' attention very quickly. All right. And again, we're going to put our hand in the air for the dead ball. At that point, we may explain the call. Okay, usually with a signal for what kind of foul it is. We may verbally explain it. Generally, when it's inbounds, it's going to be very quick. We're going to point direction, get our hand back in the air, and prepare for the restart. Okay, when we start the clock, we have our hand in the air for that dead ball. Okay, good solid blast, and we're going to wind our hand backwards 1.5 times so the hand comes back and finishes at our side. When there is a timeout, whether we call it or team calls it, all right, if it's a dead ball, any on-field player, head coach, or of course official can call it during a live ball. On-field player or head coach with possession. Okay, and again, we want to get their attention with timeout, so it'd be several short blasts or that cicada whistle. We're going to wave our hands and then signal who has the timeout. If it's an injury timeout or officials timeout, when we say timeout, it's our timeout. If it's a team timeout, we set our 2-minute timer if we have it for 1 minute, 40 seconds. At that point, we blow the whistle, and the teams have 20 seconds to be ready to play. Team timeouts, they get 2 per half, and they are 2 minutes in length using that formula I told you before. We use our timer to help record, and then also make sure you're recording timeouts on your scorecard, what quarter or what half they occurred in, at what time on the clock they occurred in, and what team. That way we have a record of timeouts. All right. And this is kind of, I already explained this, officials timeout. Okay. We call the timeout. It's our time. And then we explain the reason for the timeout. Usually it will be an injury. Sometimes we may call a timeout, to clarify a situation, talk about something. If we think we might have a mistake or a problem, we would definitely call a timeout, but we want to communicate with everybody that there is a timeout. Okay. Injuries. This is always a big point of contention. When a player gets hurt, okay, we stop play. We don't necessarily stop play immediately. So kind of the rule of thumb is we're going to stop play. If the player injured is in a scrimmage area, so, in an area where play is going on, we're going to stop play immediately to prevent further injury. If the person is not in the scrimmage area or near the play and they're injured, we're going to let the current situation play out. So, if a defensive or offensive player gets hurt during a fast break, they're not in the area, we're going to allow that fast break to continue until the team has either taken a shot, scored a goal, goalie gets it, or they're in a settled situation. So they bring the ball down, and instead of engaging in offense, they're starting to substitute or something like that. We're going to stop. The trainer can then come on the field. At that point, I always tell the athletic trainer before the game, it's good to talk to them. Hey, if we get an injury, head injury regardless, you're the final word if they can come back in the game. Okay, and if you do suspect a player has a head injury, they took a head shot, they're acting, they're stumbling around, they're holding their head, something that would concern you, you take that player to the head coach. They cannot come back in until they see the athletic trainer. Mom, who's a nurse, cannot put the player back in the game. Only if they are associated as a trained medical professional in sports medicine with the team. If you do have a situation where you had a player unconscious, had to be removed by an ambulance, any major injuries, make sure that those are reported to the assigner immediately after the game, so that we can report that to the state and everybody knows what's going on. That's important. And never rush an injured player off the field. If it looks like it's going to take more than a minute, allow all the players to return to their benches, take plenty of time to restart. Also, never restart till the player, coach, trainer are all off the field and out of the substitution box. Okay. In lacrosse, we do have what we call the mercy rule. So it's in the second half if there is a 12-goal difference. So as soon as we hit a 12-goal difference, the clock on the next face-off or next restart, the clock will stop, or will continue to run unless the team or the officials call a timeout. And that continues to the end of the game. So even if that becomes less than 12 goals, 11, 10-goal difference, once you get to that running clock situation, the clock runs through the end of the game, starts to the next whistle. Mentioned all that. And then during that running time situation, penalty times do not change. Okay. So you're still keeping penalty time in the box, stop, start. So a minute is a minute, 2 minutes is 2 minutes, 3 minutes is 3 minutes. Okay. You're still stopping and starting penalty time with the whistle. All right. If we get to overtime, so overtimes are 4-minute periods. We're going to call one captain from each team to the center of the field. All right. Explain real quickly what our overtime rules are. And then the visitor calls the coin toss, and they are calling only for choice of goal. Alternate possession stays the same as where it should be. And there is one timeout for each team. Okay. The first goal wins, sudden victory, golden goal, whatever you want to call it. They get that one timeout per overtime. All right. And one other thing, interesting thing about overtime. So any other time during the game, and we will cover this in a later class, a coach can ask for an equipment check. So during a dead ball, they can ask for an equipment check on a player on the field. We check their stick. We make sure their equipment's legal. If there's a problem, there could be a penalty. If they ask for that equipment check after a goal during regulation, they cannot if a goal was scored with an illegal stick, that goal comes off the board and we assess a penalty. The only difference is if it happens either at the very end of regulation, so you have a situation where the ball leaves the stick with time on the clock but enters the goal after time has expired, the game is considered over. They can't ask for an equipment check. The same goes in overtime on that golden goal. So if the goal goes in and it's considered legal, they cannot ask for an equipment check. Interruptions of play. So basic rule of thumb, before the game, the home school, host management, whoever decides if the field is safe, if we can play. Once the game begins, we can stop play if we feel that the situation has become unsafe. Once we start a game, the biggest unsafe situation is lightning. If you visually see lightning, stop play. Often now, the athletic trainer has an app or a device that tells you when lightning is within a certain threshold of the field, and they will tell us when to stop play. They are also the ones to tell us when to start play. Okay, so every district, every school, every area has a different procedure they use for lightning, and they all vary. The general NFHS is 30 minutes from the last sound of thunder or the last visual appearance of lightning. But again, that can change. But that's all based on what the host school says, particularly their athletic trainer. We never make the decision to restart play once it's been interrupted. And that's all from what we missed in the entire training. I will be posting this up on our YouTube channel for everybody to watch. Thank you for attending.